Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me? Yeah,
Yes.
okay, thank you. Welcome everyone to the webinar. This webinar is organized by Ethiopia Medical Association, newly established Institutional Research Ethics Review Committee. This is the first webinar, and we're hoping to have subsequent webinars on research ethics so that we can equip the professional with the necessary knowledge of research ethics while conducting research in different parts of the country. So our presenter will be Dr. Yimtu Bezinash Weldamanil. I know you all know her, but just to give a short introduction, she's a medical doctor with a PhD in medical microbiology. She's a faculty in the School of Medicine, College of Health Sciences, Addis Ababa University. She also has training in bioethics and health research ethics and has been serving in several ethics committees in the country. And currently she serves as a co-chair of the Institutional Review Board of the College of Health Sciences. Dr. Yimtu has been helping the association in establishing this ethics review committee from the very beginning. And we'd like to thank her for her continuous support and for making it happen in a very short time. We all are grateful for that. So the committee discussed that one of the very relevant topics in research ethics is just understanding what the system is, not just the details of the science, because most people have, healthcare professionals have confusion as where to get research clearance from and for which research to get research clearance and which ones are exempted. So we see a lot of confusions, and sometimes some of the research do not meet the research ethics requirements and might result in some illegal activities, which are actually not even known by the researchers themselves. So to avoid those circumstances, today we're going to discuss about the current research ethical clearance process in Ethiopia, just grossly from the process perspective. So I hope most clinicians are interested in research nowadays, and most of you are conducting research for either program fulfillment or other purposes. So I am sure you'll find this webinar very helpful. After the presentation, we'll give you the opportunity to ask questions based on your circumstance, your encounter in the past, and Dr. Yimtu will respond to that. So now I'll leave the floor for Dr. Yimtu to present. Thank you very much for joining us today, Dr. Yimtu. So over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Tigist, for the introduction and the introductory remark. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Now I'll share my PowerPoint. Before that, I would like to thank IMA and especially the IMA Institutional Review Ethics Review Committee for inviting me to this webinar. So like as Dr. Tigist said, I'll give an overview of the ethical review process, and then maybe some of the issues will be discussed with the Q&A. So let me share my. So you can see my screen, yeah, Dr. Tigist? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay.
We can.
So like the topic says, it's the current research ethical approval process in Ethiopia. So I'll just have a very brief introduction and then the requirements for proposal submission and what is ethical review process after that. So we'll, I'm sure many of you might have experience in, I mean, I'm sure you have done research and have experienced proposal review in your institutions. But for those who are new also, it will be an introductory lecture. So just as you know, I'm sure you are familiar with the Declaration of Helsinki, one of the international guidelines, especially very relevant for in medicine. So in that it says the research protocol must be submitted for consideration, comment, guidance and approval to the concerned research ethics committee before the studies begins. So not only Declaration of Helsinki, but also many international and our national guideline also have the same concept. So I know you know that what it means to have a what is a research ethics committee, but just to share that it's an independent body with a diverse qualified membership. So it's multidisciplinary, different professions, with community representative, age, gender representation, and at least a minimum of 5 members should be included. And then the institution, these ethics committees can be established at institutional and regional and national level. So what are the responsibilities of ethics committees? Foremost, it's to safeguard the rights, safety, and well-being of all research participants, with the consideration of giving special attention to research that includes vulnerable population. So the major function of research ethics committees is, of course, after the research proposal is submitted, it's to review the research proposals, approve them, document all its activities. That is, it's starting from, its minutes, agendas, the protocol versions of all that have been submitted, and anything, any correspondence, everything has to be documented. It's one of the most important things also as a research ethics committee. And then, of course, after approving, it has to oversee the ongoing research, be it by reports or doing site visits. And then what kind of applications does an ethics committee usually receive? Of course, the first is initial review of research proposals. Amendments are any changes in an already approved proposal. So that's one, that the other one. And then renewal approval period, because when an ethics committee or institutional review board, which gives an approval, it gives for a certain period of time, like mostly it's 1 year, and then it has to be renewed. It also has expedited requests for expedited review can come. And then another thing is reports, that is during the ongoing research and at the end of the study. And in between there are, of course, other applications, but these are the major ones that an ethics committee or institutional review board receives. So how does research ethics committee evaluate proposals? Because when research ethics committee or institutional review board, which the names are interchangeable, different institutions, different countries use the 2 different names, but most the functions are mostly the same. It's the mandates that differ usually. So they need to evaluate a research proposal based on local community ethical values and customs, and also international universal ethical guidelines. So they use guidelines like the national guidelines, which almost every country in the world has. And then we have a lot of international guidelines. So these are just some of them, and they keep adding because, guidelines come after when ethics, research, as research goes in its depth, and we have to have research guidelines that are responsive to that. So there are several international guidelines, and then an ethics committee based on this already existing guidelines comes up with its own standard operating procedures. That is, that means detailed functions that details its function. So it follows the standard operating procedure, and usually an ethics committee's quality grows as it has its standard operating procedure. So it's usually based on the text, rules and regulations, mandates from the its guidelines. So, and then because today's topic is about the review process in Ethiopia, I'll base most of my talk on the National Research Review Technical Guideline. This is our national guideline, which is the recent version is June 2022. It has initially it came in 1995, the first version, and then through years it has been revised as it should be, because guidelines usually are reviewed constantly, periodically, being responsive to new ethical issues that come up with new research questions, and our methodologies change, so many things change. So these have to be responsive to that. So this is our national guideline now. He has this is a new version. And it has in it, if you look at it, it has not only health research, it also has included, animal research, environmental, and so on. So it has different sections. So in that, it has the structure that it puts is the National Research Ethics Review Board, that is with its mandates and functions. It's currently based at the Ministry of Education. Before it was based in the Ministry of Science and Technology, and when it changed, now it's in the Ministry of Education. So, and then the next level are institutional research ethics review committees. These are based in research institutions, higher education institutions, health bureau, hospitals, or professional societies, like the IMA one, that is the Institutional Research Ethics Review Committee. So, and it stipulates in that guideline that any research institute in Ethiopia should have an IRB, an ethics committee, sorry, and then this it usually designates this institutional review ethics review committees as level A or B, depending on their capacity and the functions as described in this guideline. So usually when an ethics committee goes to get registered at the Ministry of Education, they usually designate this level. Okay, so now as a researcher, how do we know that we are conducting research involving human participants? Because definitely, especially in the medical field, you are doing practice, and research has to be really differentiated. So, so how do we define research? So it's basically a systematic investigation, including research development, testing, and evaluation, designed to develop or contribute to generalizable knowledge, which is very different from practice. So, and then when we talk about human participants, these are any individuals about whom an investigator, whether professional or student, conducting research obtains data through intervention or interaction with the individual, identifiable private information. So if we are embarking on a research, we know the definition, we know the human participants that are involved, so we definitely are looking for ethical approval. So when you have this, you have a research question, you have developed a research proposal, and so on, and then you have to get together your documents that you need to submit to an ethics committee. So generally, an ethics committee, that is institutional review board or institutional ethics committee, reviews the study protocol or the proposal and all associated documents that come with the research proposal. So before initiation of the study or recruitment of study participants, investigators have to submit the study protocol, of course. If it's a clinical trial, it's a trial protocol. And then you have to also include all associated documents, which are the participant information sheet, the informed consent form, any data collection tools like questionnaires, interview, discussion guides, and research participant recruitment procedures. If you are, for example, in some studies, they advertise when they recruit study participants. And if you are planning to use an advertisement, you have to submit the advertisement so that the ethics review committee also, reviews that. And then if you are doing a clinical trial, then you need an investigator brochure, which outlines the safety of the investigational drug, the pharmacology, and associated things before it is in the phase that you are trying to work at. And then if you have any plans for compensation or reimbursement, that is for time spent at for your research, for the participants, if they are coming solely for your research, then you have to also, share the information of how much you are going to pay, when you are going to pay, and so on and so forth. Share biological specimens and so on with institution abroad. You need a material transfer agreement, which is called also MTA, which you can find in the national guideline. It's annexed to the national guideline. You need to have that signed by the receiving recipient institution and your institution. So that's a material transfer agreement. And then you need to have an all investigator CV, because one of the basics of research ethics is that whoever doing the research should be qualified to do it. So the ethics committee wants to see the qualification of the investigators that are planning to do the research. So that, and then anything that is that could be associated with the, your proposed research should be submitted for IRB approval. So where do we apply? Usually, it's also written in the national guideline that all applications should first be submitted to the Institutional Review Board, Ethics Committee of institutions that the PI is affiliated with. And then, if applicable, it should go to the National Research Ethics Review Board. Because if you look at the national guideline, it outlines what the mandates and functions of the national ethics committees are. A National Ethics Review IRB is, because there it shows which protocols have to be seen, by the National Ethics Committee, like if you have exchange of biological material, if you are doing clinical trials, or genetically modified and stem cell research, emergency and humanitarian crisis of national interest. And then it also says that institutions which do not have IRBs could directly send to National Research Ethics Review Board. Otherwise, it starts from the Institutional Review Board, and then with the approval letter from the Institutional Review Ethics Committee, it goes to the national, if applicable. If it's beyond, if it is what I just said about the function of the National Ethics Committee. Otherwise, it would be with the IRB at the institution. And then we have what we call the collaborative study. It could be national, it could be different institutions in the country, or it could be international when we have some other institution abroad. So here also, we need ethical approval from collaborative institutions. This has been really a problem in a sense that there are certain levels, many levels of ethical approval, which sometimes prolongs the ethical review process, which needs really a solution somehow, how to do this, how to make it more efficient, but at the same time, rigorous ethical approval, but more efficient process. But as we stand now, it's like this. You have to have, even if you have like Addis Ababa University and another research institution is doing a research, we have to get ethical approval from both institutions, and then if it needs to go to the national IRB, then we have to send it to the national IRB. And then if it's a clinical trial, it has to go to the Ethiopian Food and Drug Administration Authority. So that's how the process would be, and that's how we apply. So what happens when it goes, it reaches all the, basically, when you want to submit a proposal to any ethics committee or institutional review board, and then they mostly should provide you with a checklist of what a complete submission is. So the ethics committee should have a checklist of what it requires from the investigators, what kind of documents it should have. So just a list, so that when it comes to the IRB, then it will be a complete submitted protocol. So the IRB or IC review process will be when it receives the documents, the submissions from an investigator, it will review the documents. That is, review the completeness of submitted documents. As I said, the ethics committee requires certain documents that needs approval before it gives the go-ahead to do research. So according to the checklist, the administratively it will review whether it's complete, the submitted document. And then when it's complete, it will give it a number, and then it starts the review process. But before the review, the type of review will be determined within the chairperson and secretary. If the ethics committee has a secretariat, the secretariat and the chairperson and so on will determine what type of review it will be. Like whether the proposal will be full board, or whether it will be expedited or will be exempt. So this is done based on the requirements, because again, if you look at the national guideline, you'll see which protocols need full board, that is convened meeting of an IRB, which are eligible for expedited review, which are eligible for exempt review. So the ethics committee would have, like I mentioned earlier, when in its standard operating procedure, it would have this kind of determinations, which protocols it should review as a convened meeting, which it can expedite, which it can exempt. So after it has been determined, it will be sent, for example, if it's a full board, if it needs a convened meeting, it will be reviewed depending on the ethics committee might have a primary reviewer system, or it can have all review board members, the ethics committee members reviewing it. So it depends on the type of system it has also, which it can be unique for different ethics committees. Because for the ethics committee side that I come from the institutional review board at the College of Health Science, we have a primary reviewer system, which means within the ethics committee members, it will be given to 2 members who will review each protocol based on a standard assessment form that we have. And then they will present it at the convened full board meeting. And then there will be discussion. And then finally, it will be a decision of the ethics committee as a whole. So the decision will be communicated to the PI. So the decision might be approval, or it could be approval with recommendation. So with comments for improvement for the PI. So then the PI will respond to each comment from the ethics committee, and then finally the approval letter will be issued. And then depending on the type of research, as I said, if it falls within the mandate of the National Ethics Review Board, then it will be sent with the approval letter from the Institutional Review Board, Ethics Committee. It will be sent to the National Ethics Review Board. And if it's a clinical trial, then it should be sent to the Ethiopian FDA, that is Food and Drug Administration Authority, which authorizes clinical trials. Maybe they should get this authorization for import and use of investigational drugs that will be used in the clinical trial. So that will be sent to the Ethiopian FDA. And then the review process will be, we have initial review, which is mostly for, like I mentioned earlier, it goes through that, most of the proposals, but there are also others which I will dwell on more, like the expedited review. Because expedited it's about timing. It's how long it will take to review that protocol. Otherwise, we take the same assessment of protocol that we would use for the initial review. Because expedited review is a protocol that does not need to be seen by the full convened ethics committee, but can be carried out by one or two of its committees assigned by the chairperson. So what kind of proposals warrant an expedited review? These are research procedures present that do not present no more than minimal risk harm to the research participant, the environment specifically, and communities at large. So what does minimal risk mean? Minimal risk is the probability and magnitude of harm or discomfort anticipated in the research, which are not greater than normal, the ordinarily encountered in daily life or during the performance of routine physical and psychological examination or tests. So there are determinations that should be followed, even if the PI wants to apply for expedited review. That person should, look at the requirements, the eligibility of a research proposal, whether it requires it's eligible for expedited review, and then it will be reviewed again by the chairperson secretariat to say, okay, this warrants an expedited review and will be assigned. So it doesn't have to wait for the full convened ethics committee, and then it will be it will be required, and then it doesn't need to be to wait for the fully convened trial. So the other thing is, the next is exempt research. Exempt research is, this is a very busy slide, but I took it from the National Research Ethics Review Technical Guideline. So it says those which are eligible are, research conducted in established or commonly accepted educational settings, or using educational tests, and then usually these are tests that are used for quality improvement, quality assurance, quality management, and so on. So research involving collection of or study of existing data, documents, records, pathological specimens, if these sources are publicly available or recorded without identifiers, or evaluation or examination of government projects or programs designed to explore public benefit or service programs, because these are not it's not for generalizable knowledge, but more of quality assurance and quality improvement programs and others. So these are exempt research, but a researcher, a person, an individual cannot determine and say, okay, this is an exempt research, I will not take it to the ethics committee, because these determinations are made by the ethics committee. Whether a research is exempt or expedited will be decided by the research ethics committee, because there are more, what do you call it, specific details of what an exempt research is, and how to apply for an exempt research, how it will be documented in the ethics committee. So this is one of the areas of review. Others are accelerated review for in the event of a public health emergency, as we saw just in the recent past about in COVID. accelerated review process was something that we came to understand very well, because it depends when there is a disease outbreak or disaster relief operation. You cannot wait for the duration. Normally, in a normal situation, a research proposal will go through a review process. So this is accelerated review, but does not mean that the rigor in the quality of the review process should not be compromised. With the same thing, it means that it's done very fast. Usually it's not expedited. It's done at the full board, depending on the risk, of course. And if it's not eligible for expedited, but accelerated is just having a very fast one, a very fast review, but still maintaining the quality of rigorous ethical review. The other review is amendment. That is anything that is done to the study procedures. Even if you think that they are minor changes, the ethics review, the ethics committee has to review and approve it. And then you can apply it, because you cannot amend your proposal, your already approved proposal, and implement it and then and so on. So it has to be approved before you implement any changes in the proposal. So this is an amendment, what you call amendment. Of course, other things also are reported. So the other thing is continuing review. As I said, ethics committees, after they have approved a proposal, they have to oversee it. And this they do by continuing review. They do it at intervals, which are appropriate to the degree of risk, because when the proposal is reviewed, usually the ethics committee, decides, appreciates the risk of the study from the review process, and then depending on the risk, it will give the PI the time when reports should come. It could be like 3 months, it could be like 9 months, it could be normally it's a 1 year, but depending on the risk of exposure of the participants, it could be less than 1 year. So these are continuing progress reports that are required. So, and then post-approval, what is the responsibility of researchers? The main thing is, of course, to adhere to the approved protocol, meaning approved protocol, including the information sheet, consent form, any associated documents that have been approved by the ethics committee should be applied during the research. So very important to follow the inclusion-exclusion criteria, obtaining and documenting informed consent, very important. Getting prior approval for any changes, that is amendments. And then it's very good to have accurate records, because your records can be checked even after the completion, the study has been completed. So, and then if you have any unanticipated problems or adverse events, protocol deviations to, that you have done to save the safety, for the safety of the participants, and any anticipated, you should report to the institutional board or the ethics committee. And then submit follow-up report as required. And do not forget to renew your approval date, because after it has expired, then you are doing unethical work because it doesn't have ethical approval. So do not forget to renew your approval date, and then submit end of study report. So it's very important. Very, very, from my experience, not many people do that, but it is required to have a study, end of study report. So in summary, researchers should be informed of ethical and regulatory requirements before initiating a study, during the conduct of the study, during documenting, analysis, and dissemination of study results. So it's very good if you embark on research to know what is required from you. So we have the national guideline, you should have ethics, basic ethics training are available. So you should do that, and then also know what you are, what is a requirement. So I think I have, okay, this is just an overview of the process. If you have any questions, please, these are some of the references that I took. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rimtu. It was a very informative and very brief presentation. I am sure everyone has learned something new, including myself. So I'll leave the floor for the audience. If you have any questions, you can raise your hand or you can drop your questions on the chat box. So your questions can be from your personal experience. If you have encountered any inconvenience or anything with regard to securing ethical clearance, you can ask that. Or if you have any ongoing research, you can also ask how to get your clearances if it's still not clear, or any other related questions. I think you should really use this opportunity because I personally have experience. Yeah, that's great. Dr. Rimtu, do you think you can share the link to the national guideline, the updated guideline? Is it available online?
Unfortunately, it's not available online, but I can share the copy. I don't know how you'll share it to members. Maybe on your website.
Yes, we can.
I can send you the version, and then you can share it with the people. Yeah.
Yes, we can attach it together with the webinar video on the EMA website.
Yes.
Great. Thank you. How much time does it take to get ethical clearance? Dr. Rimtu, I'll filter the questions. You don't have to go through them. The first question is, how much time does it take to get an ethical clearance?
That's a very important question, and I don't have a very good answer, because it depends on it depends where you submit it. Because generally, for example, in my experience, again, I can start from my experience. Our institutional review board, the College of Health Science, meets once a month, and then depending on how good the initial submission is, how complete everything is. If you submit maybe 10 days before the next meeting, it will be reviewed, presented at if it's a full convened, if it warrants a full board meeting, and then comments will be given. The comments after that does not necessarily wait for the next ethics review committee meeting, because it depends on the comments, how vast it is, because the determination of the institutional review board might be, minor comments, major comments, and so on. So if it's a minor one, the PI will receive the comments and then respond point by point, and then it will be reviewed and be finished like in the next, before waiting for the next ethics review committee meeting. But like I said, it depends on, because I cannot give you an answer, because if it's a collaborative research, then you have to get an ethics review approval letter from the institution, and then if it needs to go to national, it has to go another step. If it's a clinical trial, to FDA. So it depends on the type of research that you have. But if it's expedited, it could happen very fast, like in 2 weeks or so, and so on. So that's what I can say. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rimtu. The other is, I'm not sure if I get the question very well, but I think Dr. Mamar is asking about how the committees at FDA can be available. If you can clarify it further, maybe we'll get your question correctly. So it's about availability of the committees at FDA. Maybe, I don't know. In relation to that, maybe whether it's FDA or the National Research Ethics Committee. Chala also asked that is it mandatory to send to the National Research Ethics Committee after institution review approved it. So I think this has been covered, but just to refresh their memory, what are the requirements to go to the FDA or the National Research Ethics Committee for a single research proposal? I think it's better to address it that way.
Okay. So the requirement to go to FDA, Ethiopian FDA, because there are in different FDAs in many countries. So Ethiopian FDA is when you are going to have a clinical trial. So clinical trial, and if you need, for example, if you are going to look at a new investigational drug and you need to import it and use it in the research. So it is only the FDA that gives authorization. It's not the same as ethical clearance. It does not have an ethics committee. It has its own review system, but it's not looking at the ethics rather than, in a different way, looking at authorization of the clinical trial. So that's one. But in the National Ethics Committee, it's not mandatory to send all research. It's only mandatory if the study is, for example, like clinical trial. Again, if the study is, if you need to send biological specimens to an institution abroad because it requires a material transfer agreement, and then, those kind of things. So it needs that. And if it is some stem cell research, and another one is, national disasters that are of national priority. It doesn't mean that every, like, for example, during COVID, we used to approve different studies at the institutional review board level. But sometimes when it's of a big proportion of national priority, it might need to go to national IRB. So these are clearly written in the national guidelines. So beyond that, if the institutional review board can approve others. But again, there are also stipulations that, as I mentioned, there are they categorize institutional review ethics committee in level A and level B. Depending on their capacity. So that what is the capacity is also written in the guideline, because they come, they look at your operations, work, whether you have SOPs and other things, and they give you a level. So there it's written that level A can look at, more than minimal risk studies, but not, otherwise not written under the mandate of the National Ethics Committee. But level B might look at low risk studies. So it depends again on the status of your ethics committee. And then, of course, those things that are not really, that are left for the National Ethics Committee, because previously there was a lot, the list was long, but now it has become more, the institutional review ethics committees are now more empowered to look at more research without sending it to National Ethics Committee. But it's good to look at the National Ethics guideline to see which ones need to go there. Okay, thank you. So
thank you.
I think you are okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, you are good. Yeah. Should all the participants of the study be included in the signature form? What does that mean? Participants meaning researchers?
I think that's how I understood it as well.
Yeah. So signature form which is submitted to the institutional review board, ethics committee, or the national, because not all. Sometimes, the major ones could suffice, but mostly for us, because it depends on the list of investigators. But if it's, PI, co-PI, and others should be included, I think, and it's a requirement. It depends on the requirement of the institutional ethics committee. And then the next one is, in most institutions, when someone proposes to RCT, ethical committees tend to reject it by all means possible. Usually, Ethiopian research personnel scenario. How is this problem solved? Well, I don't. Why should it be rejected? I don't know, because at least in our institution, it's not rejected. So even when an ethics committee rejects a proposal, I think it is good to mention the reason for rejection, because usually an ethics committee is not should be looked at as one of the stakeholders in research, meaning that, of course, the primary role is to safeguard the safety of the participants, but also promotes ethically sound research. So it's one of the stakeholders in research, because ethics committee is also is not like does not want to be a roadblock for research. So it promotes ethically sound research. So I'm not sure, because when you have randomized clinical trial, the ethics committee, I don't know, it should give you the reasons why it is rejecting, but otherwise, if it's a properly written, not written, but yeah, designed study, then it should go to the national, as long as it's a clinical trial, and so on, and then, go to those things. But I don't know. This, as I said, it's the reasons should be given. So do you think it's a duplication between IRB and the national one, except in a clinical trial? Sometimes it depends again on the institutional review board or the ethics committee, the capacity, because not all ethics committees have the same capacity. So sometimes some are new, some are have a lot of experience, some have passed through. When you go through experience, I don't mean that you count years, but you have improved your quality. And quality, like as I mentioned, having a proper standard operating procedure, which you actually implement, having clear procedures, having the capacity, the composition of the ethics committee, and so on and so forth. Quality is a very broad concept. And when you talk about ethics committee, it has its own characteristics. So if it depends on which kind of ethics committees has reviewed it, because it cannot be generalized, in the Ethiopian context. But having these different levels is really has to be solved somehow. You come from, for example, in our institution, you have your department ethics committee. From department ethics committee, it comes to the IRB. From the IRB, if it's eligible, depending on the type of study, it goes to national, and so on and so forth. So those kind of steps are a lot of duplication, a lot of multiple duplications of review. So I think somehow this has to be solved, because it takes a long time. So, and then this is a question for discussion for any fora. I think the one that is been raised, this one, the duplication. And then the other is, what will be the action of the IRB if the researchers deviate against the DUS? Okay, so it depends on the deviation, because we have adverse events, and then we have protocol deviation. Sometimes protocol deviations have to be investigated, because after they have to be reported and then investigated by the ethics committee. So it depends on the severity of the deviation and how it happened, because sometimes protocol deviations happen, especially if it's an interventional study. It's something that you do for the safety of the participants. Sometimes, especially in clinical trials and so on. you don't have time to report and then have that. But as long as you have that deviation, you report it immediately to the IRB and to the responsible, to the FDA, to your sponsor, and so on. So it depends. So it depends on the severity of the deviation, what the IRB could do. So it's the IRB in its own way is not a regulatory body as such that it can, but it can withhold its approval. If it stops or suspends its approval, then that research cannot go on. So it depends on the deviation, and then the investigation of the deviation, how it happened, and so on. And then the next one is, suppose we are a part of a hospital with no IRB. Does that mean we directly go to the national one? Okay. So I think if you are part of if you don't have an IRB, maybe this will be a question for Dr. Tigist. Maybe, I don't know, the EMA ethics committee, whether it takes this kind of review. But in the national guideline, it says one of its mandates is, it can review institutions where there is no IRB. And it's an institutional review board or institutional review committee. So maybe Dr. Tigist can also comment on this, maybe because it's an association, maybe. Yeah. Dr. Tigist, you want to say something on this one?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Imtu. As you said, the associations, they're not specific to one, they're not institutionalized, so they can review any proposals from anywhere as long as they fulfill the appropriate requirements. But before going to that, I think one of the things that they can do is, if they are working, I think, regional hospitals under the federal system, whether they're teaching or not, most of the time they have their own IRB, as far as I know. But other hospitals who do not have IRB are those who are under the regional health bureaus, including Addis Ababa or any other region. So in that case, one of the places where you can secure clearances from the regional health bureau. For example, in Addis Ababa, for all the regional hospitals, Addis Ababa Regional Health Bureau, IRB committee is the one to provide the clearance. So I think that's one of the options they can use. This also applies for private hospitals, not only government hospitals. Am I right, Dr. Imtu? That's how
yeah
normally
thank
do.
You. Yeah.
So
yeah,
I think
you reminded me.
Yeah.
Yeah. You reminded me of the regional bureau, RBCI. You are right. Like even when we have studies, like our students usually have, for example, they could go to Zodito Hospital and so on and so forth. So usually the regional, the hospital requires approval from this regional bureau. So I think this is one of the, you have responded very well to this. I think that's the information we have now.
So, thank you, Dr. Imtu. Maybe one thing associated with it, someone was suggesting that someone can apply to any IRB, whichever it is that they're comfortable with. But I think, for example, if we apply for Addis Ababa Regional Health Bureau IRB and we try to conduct research at Blackline, it's not acceptable, right? Because the hospital has its own IRB. I think knowing the structure of the IRB is important, because the mandate and the responsibility associated with it comes through the structure, right? So it's not like one person can secure ethical clearance from any institution that they're comfortable with and conduct a research in an unrelated hospital, which is not under the structure of the IRB. So I think that should be made clear, because someone suggested that, and that's not truly applicable, right, Dr. Imtu, maybe? Dr. Imtu? Jigu, I think we can give you the Jigu, okay. I am trying to unmute you to give you a permission so that you can speak. Yes, now you're unmuted. You can ask your questions or you can suggest what you have been writing on the chat box. Please continue, Gamachis. Can you hear me? Can you hear me from Ema's side? Anybody?
Yes.
Okay, Ejigu, I have unmuted you. You can speak, please. If not, Dr. Yimtu, are you with us? Dr. Yimtu, I think you can continue. Dr. Yimtu, your mic is mute. I don't know, maybe if you have trouble with the connection.
Sorry. I'm sorry. I was disconnected. Can you hear me now?
Okay, yes, we can hear you.
Sorry. So we go to the next question, or?
Yes, I was trying to discuss one of the comments which was posted by one of the attendees. It was suggested that anybody can apply to any IRB they're comfortable with, but considering the structure of the IRB, their mandate, their level, there is a structured way of obtaining ethical clearance, and that should not, someone should not assume that they can get ethical clearance from one IRB and conduct a research in unrelated institution, right? So it's important to know where to go, where to secure ethical clearance before just going and asking one IRB to secure ethical clearance. You should know where to ask first. So that's what I was trying to make a point. I think you can continue. Dr. Imtu? Ema side, is it audible?
Sorry.
Yes, we can.
All right, Dr. Imtu, I think you can continue.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. You can continue with the remaining questions.
Okay. So which one are we?
The ones we have covered are
Okay, is there a deadline for submitting is there a deadline for submitting the study's final report and follow-up data? Is that a must? We require in our IRB, I think most IRBs also require ethics committees, so that you should submit study final report. It's one of the many guidelines if you look at the functions of IRBs, it also mentions about receiving final report. So generally it's a must, but as I mentioned, in my experience, it's very rare that people, investigators submit. It's not the whole report. Usually we have a format for final report, what it should include. So it's not very tedious, but usually nobody remembers it. But it's a must. For me, it's a must. It's like an approved research. When it's finished, it should be given. So I think that's one. Another is, what did you write? There is one, Dr. Tigist, do you want to request someone to give a comment?
I think at the end.
Okay, because you mentioned I saw a text. Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
I'll give them the opportunity.
Okay. And then it's about amendments. The next question is about Could amendments include study site changes, study population change? Yeah, I mean, these are especially study site changes, study population changes are major amendments, because amendments, we call them also minor and major. So major, usually major amendments are reviewed by the full board, while minor things can be reviewed at the secretariat level, meaning with the chairperson and others, one or two people amendments. But these are the ones that you are mentioning are major amendments. If you change your study population, I think that will be a major amendment. So anything, any change to the already approved protocol is called an amendment. So even if you change PI and so on. So the next thing is how ethics dumping is managed by a national research ethics, especially in collaborative research. Any experiencing regarding this issue, Western researchers tend to bring their studies to low minimum settings when their respective EC rejected their protocol. Okay, there, I don't know the National Ethics Review Board, how it handles it actually, but in the national guideline, it's written under collaborative research. You can see the section that it talks about this kind of issues, like when we talk about international collaborative research, there should be a justification, like, for example, why Ethiopia is chosen as a study site and other things. So it is addressed there. And like you mentioned, ethics dumping is another big topic. Might not be for today, but it's addressed in the national guideline. And I think it's a good question. Maybe we don't have time to discuss that, but it's addressed in the guideline, and how actually they do it needs to their function. Okay, IRB and Ethics Committee, are they different body? No, they are not. It's, as I mentioned, they are just Institutional Review Board or Institutional Ethics Committee, Institutional Review Committee. These are different names that are given. And now, even in Ethiopia, we used to have different names, like our Institutional Review Board is called Institutional Review Board, but now the national guideline, the new one, says all institutional level ethics committee should be called Institutional Review Ethics Committees. And then it also has it has also kept the designation IRB to the national, but when you look at it, it's just the name. It depends on where you use it and so on, but the mandates can be different and so on, but they are the same. If I want to isolate some bacteria from human body, laws of people living on streets, will the study be exempted? Oh, now you're talking about vulnerable population. So even though it's very hard to just to comment like in a one sentence whether this should be exempted or not, because exemption also is a lot of criteria, like I told you. So when you talk about even expedited or exemption and so on, it all depends on the risk of the study. So, and then just with that sentence, we are talking about people living on streets, which are vulnerable. So it has other ethical issues. So I don't know if it will be exempted or not, depend on the full proposal. We need to review that, but just looking at it, I just say, the first thing that comes is you are doing research on vulnerable population. So it's a very hard question, but okay, thank you. So I'll move to the next one. So sending protocols from remote universities to national and receiving time response is a major challenge. So 1 to 3 is on the same subject from the same response. Yes. Okay, 1, given the presence of experts or committee members of the local IRB who are near the study participant, what is the rationale? Okay. Is it obligatory to submit the protocol for repurposing existing drugs for other diseases? And 3, we encounter difficulties after collaborating with the ministry and receiving their support letter based on records and when submitting the findings to journals can retrospective ethical. Okay, so remote universities depends on which remote universities. I don't know, because there are also good with experienced ethics committees in remote universities, but I don't know which universities you are referring to. Of course, it's a challenge. Anyway, and then the rationale of sending to the national level. One, I think, for example, when we talk about it's only the MTA. Usually the MTA is usually approved by the national, and the local review committee cannot have that mandate to send because you use MTA when you export the material. Yeah, there will be people asking for that when you export it, be it by air or through other means. They usually ask an MTA, so this kind of thing. So depending on the type, there will be some rationale, but it's also a broad question. Repurposing existing drugs for other diseases, because repurposing is also using the drug for another purpose for which it was approved, yeah, other than its approval. So it could be, depending on how you are using it, it could be designated as a clinical trial, but you have to check in the FDA website. They have also what it means, clinical trial, what falls under that, and so on and so forth. So you have to check that and see if it falls between whether you have to send that. So what do you mean? Is it obligatory to submit the protocol for national? If you mean for national, yeah. Otherwise, anywhere you have to submit the protocol. It's a study, yeah. But when we talk about national, whether it goes to FDA, please check on the Ethiopian FDA. They have the list of ethics. That need authorization. Another one, we encounter difficulties after collaborating with the ministry. Which ministry? And receiving their support letter based on records and when submitting the finding. You mean Ministry of Health or? Okay. Can retrospective ethical clearance be obtained using there is no retrospective ethical clearance. Always ethical clearance is done prospectively. You cannot do a study and ask for ethical clearance. That is one thing that we cannot do. What is your, according to my knowledge, what is your comment on the review fees and its amount at different fees in Ethiopia? For example, it does not request any payment, but others request variable amounts from researchers applying for ethical clearance. Okay, so review fees, they are also, they are possible. They are exercised everywhere in the world to a review fee for protocol review. So what do the ethics committee use it? Usually they use it for their activities because they need to have a secretariat. They need to hire a person. They need many things like in the office and so on. They have expenses. But usually when there is a fee, it usually does not go directly to the IRB. So it should go to the institution, and the institution should know that this is something that came
Hello, Dr. Imtu. I think she's joining back. If you have other questions in the meantime, please drop it on the chat box.
I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, because of my internet.
It's all right.
Yeah, when I try to join by through my phone, it says that it's not allowed to unmute as a participant.
Yeah, we're sorry. I'll give you the permission.
So anyways, let me go through the questions fast. What is your comment on the review fee? So like you said, AU does not request any payment, but the payment has to be generally it should not, the payment should not be should take into consideration the type of research, I think. If it's a student's proposal, if it's something that, comes with funding, big funding and others, it should have different payment scheme, and the payment will be and so on, because this is about ethics. So otherwise it's allowed and it's practiced everywhere in the world. But like I said, the best thing to do is have the fee go to the institution rather directly to the IRB, but the institution has to use it for the function of the IRB, because really the IRB needs a lot of, when I talk about site visit, if you need to visit some research and to see their activities, you need funds. You need a lot of funds for if you want to have trainings for your members and so on, you need a lot of funds, but otherwise it has to be a balance between that. So how can we check if clinical trial going to be done in our setting is being registered or not in an online platform? Is there any link you can share to us? Unfortunately, we don't have a clinical trial registration, which many countries have. So that's one thing that many institutions, research institutions, are trying to help materialize, because it's important to know which type of clinical trials are running, so there will not be redundancy that you are trying to, you are living in another area of the Ethiopia, and then you are trying to develop a proposal while an ongoing study is going on in other part of the country. So I think it's a very important question, and we don't have, there should be a clinical trial registration like other countries. So can the IRB review clinical trial in Ethiopia? You mean any institutional review board?
Yeah, the question is
because anything, be it clinical trial, be it any study, has to start from the institutional review ethics committee. Then with its approval, if it's a clinical trial, it goes to the national and then to the FDA. Level A, yeah, it says in the national guideline that level A can yeah, you mean level A? Yeah, I saw the text. So level A can review, but still, as things stand now, they have to go to the national ethics and then ethics, the FDA, because still we have, even though it says level A also has reviews clinical trial, it has to go for authorization to the FDA. Okay, so any other questions? I think the list is finished. Yeah, FDA, yeah, Ethiopian Food and Drug Administration. It used to be called other names, but now it is Ethiopian EFD. Okay, so Dr. Tigist, I think maybe you wanted somebody to comment, to add their comment.
Yes, Jugu, I was trying to give him an opportunity to speak. Jugu, I have allowed you. You can unmute your mic, and yes, you can add your opinion. Thank you. Jugu, can you hear me? Dr. Imtu, you can hear me, right? Okay, so you can speak.
Yes,
Jugu.
I can hear you, but I cannot hear Jugu.
Yeah.
He's unmuted, but not.
Yeah. Okay, I think in the meantime, some of you are asking questions that are already addressed in the lecture that Dr. Yimto provided. I suggest all of you to go back and watch the video after the AMA team uploaded it on their website. The link will be shared. I think AMA team, you can share them the link to the website. So I think you can check the link in a couple of days so that you can access the entire recording, including the lecture and the Q&A, where you can learn more and comprehend it better. If there are any other additional documents that are essential, Dr. Yimtu will share that with us, and we will also upload it together, including the national guideline. I see Dr. Jugu is having trouble connecting his audio. Yeah, I think it's better if you can write any of your suggestions. So let's give the audience another, I don't know, couple of minutes if they have anything to add. Since this is an overview of the entire ethical clearance system in the country and not a specific lecture, we have not prepared any post-test, but I think for your attendance, AMA will provide the appropriate CO point. So we'll not have a post-test for this one. If you have, I don't know, questions, Dr. Imdu, what do you think? Shall we wait for them a couple of minutes?
No, I wanted only. I was referring to Jugu if he wanted to say something that he can write, but I guess it's okay. Yeah. So I think
he can
time is
also
also.
reach out. Yeah, he can also reach out to the AMA team via email, and his questions or opinions can be addressed any other time. Thank you very much, Dr. Imtu, for making time out of your busy schedule to address this issue, this very important issue for our audience. I'd like to thank you on behalf of the committee and the Ethiopia Medical Association. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation and thank you for the questions.
Thank you, Dr. Imtu. Thank you, the audience. Have a great stay. AMA team, you can take it from here, I guess.